So Simon Bartholomew, welcome to This in Franchise. How are you doing today?
I'm doing really good, thanks, Ed. Really looking forward to today.
Fantastic.
Chatting with you.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to it as well. We obviously spoke a week or so ago, and I like to try and prepare a few questions that maybe you're not expecting, but it is looking at your career, and it's quite interesting, really, how you've travelled through kind of a couple of different sectors, but really found your home with Oscar Foods. So we're going to go into that in a little bit. So, before we do, I just wanted to ask you your very first job.
Well, I mean, it depends how you look at my first job. I mean, going way back, I worked part-time in restaurants as waiters because I'd always wanted to go into hotel catering management. I then worked bars in Brighton on pop concerts while I was a student, which was great fun. But my first real job and what got me into franchising was working with McDonald's. And it was a bit of an accident, really, because I came out of university having been going to work in hotel management, but didn't have a job when I came out of university. And looking in the job centre in Brighton one day, I saw an advert for a trainee manager for a new hamburger restaurant that was opening with a company that had a chain of 15 restaurants in the UK. And I thought, well, that would be something to learn while I look for a proper job. Applied, went to an interview, joined McDonald's and worked with them for 9 years, all the way up to area supervisor, looking after 5 restaurants, some in the West End of London and some on the outskirts of London. And really never really looked back. It was, the training provided by that and the idea of franchising just really grabbed me, and my career just went from there, and I never went back to hotels.
Wow. Okay. So when I was younger, I think McDonald's was seen as the place that you kind of work if there was nowhere else to go. But I've since learned that's not the case at all. Actually, it can produce a really great career for somebody, can't it? So you mentioned about the training. What's it like there for employees?
I mean, when I joined, it was very early. There were something like 20 restaurants in the UK when I joined. And I worked my way up from trainee manager, and it was a really good foundation because everybody that joins McDonald's joins at a restaurant level. So you have to work in the restaurants, whichever department you're going into, you have to work. So everybody understands the restaurants. And what really inspired me was I'd spent some time in hotel management while I was doing my university course. And a lot of the time as a hotel manager, I found you were a bunch of keys walking around opening doors for people and answering questions to people. Where when I went to McDonald's, I made it to store manager very quickly. And by the age of 21, I was running my own restaurant with full control of the P&L. Yes, I didn't go out looking for different suppliers. I had to use the right suppliers. But I was learning to run a business and learning the finances of running a business and running a restaurant, with all the staff and everything that involved. And it became much more of a management job than it ever was in a hotel. And I think, like you, a lot of people think McDonald's is a hamburger restaurant and it's a job where people, start their careers and move on. But actually, I found as a manager in McDonald's and moving up to an area manager, you had far more responsibility than I would have done working in some of the bigger hotels in London. And I don't think you can beat their training in management. It's years since I left, but I was still stand McDonald's training in good stead for anybody that wanted to go into management.
I guess that's an important reason for their success, right? It's they've got a good management structure in place, from franchisee all the way down, right? Well, even above that, I guess, from the franchisor staff. So shows that kind of rigid structure, although it may not suit everybody, it can produce great results, right?
It is, and I think like any franchising system, it is a very rigid system, and the training product is there, but they train people to take initiative. So like in any system, the rigidity is there, but for someone that wants to really get on and is ambitious, there are ways to work within that system using your own initiative. And I always sort of look in franchising as franchisors write the rule book and write the manuals, but it's written on paper, so you can fold it a little bit and you can change and bend it a little bit, but you just can't tear pages out. The system is there to be followed, but that doesn't mean you have to be so rigid that it hurts the business. And that's the great strength of franchising, is that you've got franchisees out there who are running their own businesses, and they've got skin in the game, as people say. It's their money they're playing with. So if you as a franchisor aren't telling them and giving them the right advice, they will soon tell you.
Yeah. Okay. That's interesting. So did you have a connection with the franchisee of your branch or your area? I think you took over an area after a while.
Yeah. When I joined the company, it would have looked as a corporate company in the UK. I mean, McDonald's was bought over by a franchisee who went into partnership with the corporation. And I worked for them and worked my way up. Just as I was leaving, or just before I left McDonald's, I helped them open their first franchised unit in the UK. I then went out and worked with some franchise units in Finland with them. And that really grabbed my attention to franchising. And because it was new in the UK, in that country, other than the master franchisee, it was difficult to get into franchising. And I was offered an opportunity to work with KFC, where I was working with franchisees all the time, and that was my responsibility in KFC. So I moved. So I would say, although I didn't work with a franchisee with McDonald's, I learned what franchising was, and they whetted my appetite for it. And then I moved on into franchising from there.
Was there big differences? Because I think a bit between McDonald's and KFC, because I think a lot of people assume it's pretty much the same, just different kind of menu,
Operationally, and management-wise, it's very similar. I mean, they're fast food restaurants. From working in a franchise situation, certainly in my days, McDonald's owned the restaurants, so the franchisees leased the restaurants from the company, whereas with KFC, the franchisees buy and lease their own properties. So when you're working in KFC, when I was working with franchisees, it wasn't just about the restaurant operations. It was about finding new sites, finding new locations, helping franchisees plan and build those sites and open them. And working with franchisees that were not only operating restaurants, but many of them were building their own property portfolios at the same time of fast food restaurants, which put a different element to it and taught me a lot more about business in that respect.
Yeah, I find that quite interesting, actually, because I guess I've spoken to a few different types of businesses over these podcasts, but there have been a few that are from the same kind of world, virtual PAs or virtual assistants, however they want to be called. On the face of it, I just think, don't you all just do the same thing? But actually, when I spoke to them all, very different, actually. And it is a lot down to the people and the processes that they have. So I think that's an interesting thing for anybody who's kind of thinking about joining a franchise. Well, don't just look at one in an area you're interested in. Let's look at a few. I mean, I guess you'd agree with that, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I came from hotel and catering, and hospitality was where I always wanted to be. But now I guess I'm still loosely in hospitality, but I'm in pet food manufacturing, looking after pets, and it's a completely different discipline. But the management style and franchising and the principles of that is the same. And it's, to me, the joy of franchising is, as a franchisor, is helping people develop and grow their own businesses. And that can be the same in any business. And I think as a franchisee, it's important you enjoy the sector you go into, but there are so many facets to that and so many different ways of operating it in every sector that you've just got to investigate, and you've got to talk to lots of people and go to franchise shows and talk to different franchisors, because you might think, oh, I want to do this because that's what I've always done before. But the beauty of franchising is you don't have to have previous experience. The training is there, and you can, just by talking to people, find actually you can develop a passion for something that you just never knew you had. And certainly that's what happened to me. My passion was in in chefing and waiting and the restaurant side, but I ended up in fast food, and now I'm in pet food and absolutely love it. But when I was at university, I would never have dreamt that I'd have a passion for working in the pet food industry.
Yeah, I guess on the face of it, it doesn't sound that kind of exciting, does it? But hopefully we'll kind of get out of you why there's some interesting parts to it in a moment. But I'm interested to find out how you made that transition from, the fast food restaurant world into Oscar Pet Foods, ultimately, the pet food industry. So how did you make that transition?
It was interesting because I worked with KFC and then I was working with a sandwich chain that I was a franchisee in. So I had my own restaurant up in the Preston area.
Okay.
And that was doing well, and we built some stores, but we came out of that, and I was looking to get back into being franchisor rather than franchisee. And I was toying with the idea of becoming a consultant or looking at things like that. And then I met with Richard Martin, who's now the managing director of Oscar Pet Foods, and his then partner. And they were just taking the business over from the founder. They were family of the founder, but they were taking the business over. The founder had taken it as far as he could take it and was retiring. And one of the things I like about franchising is I've always looked for franchisors where there is a founder who believes in the business. So, McDonald's, in the States, everybody knows was founded by Ray Kroc, who believed very much in the fast food service restaurant, and looked at that. And franchising came along after building successful restaurants. With KFC, the Colonel had a passion for his recipe of chicken, and franchising came about. In fact, it wasn't the Colonel that brought it into franchising; it was Pepsi. But the founder's story, I think, has always been really important. And when I met Richard and talked about the founder, and Oscar was developed by an animal nutritionist who started making pet food for other people, what they call an own label brand pet food supplier. But he found that was very restrictive, and he couldn't actually develop the foods that he thought were right for dogs, because when he's making for other people, you've got accountants and bookkeepers trying to keep the costs down, trying to look at cheaper ingredients, and always wanting to make a little bit more money. Whereas working with franchisees, Oscar found that they could control the product and they could control the knowledge base of the people selling the product. And that enabled them to really do what was right for pets. And it was that founder's story that grabbed me. So I sort of met with them, and in my mind, I was thinking they were looking for somebody to work with their franchisees. And I was thinking I could perhaps do it as a consultant, but ended up joining them, and a few years later becoming a shareholder and director of the business. And I've been there now. Yeah, I was working it out the other day. I've been there 20 years, coming up next June, which is probably the longest I've been with any business, and just love it. There's nothing better than spending your life working with franchisees, helping them grow their business, and when that's in a business that's helping people look after their pets, and meeting pets and talking about pets all the time, and going into offices where there's dogs running around all the time. It's just a great way of living. Absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, sounds good. And just to go back to that founder's story, so on the face of it, I thought, when I first had my pets, it was, you just get them tins and just, that's it, whiskers, off you go, and they're happy. But I didn't realize how bad that type of food on a regular basis can be for the cat's teeth and things like this. And both of my cats now are on special cat food for urinary issues, teeth, old age, all sorts of things that I just didn't realize that there was out there. But I guess it makes sense when people love their animals so deeply that they should actually look after their nutrition as well. So I guess what I wanted to find out is, do you have teams of scientists in the background that are sort of developing this food, or how does it kind of work? How do you kind of keep on top of the latest trends in that world as a business?
Yeah, I mean, Our business is broken into different centres. So we have the support centre that looks after franchise recruitment and training and bringing those on. We've then got within that centre, we've got a team of helpline people. So we've got behaviourists and nutritionalists that are helping franchisees and helping with the training, looking at the products. We have a product centre that is very much looking at trends within the industry. And looking at what happens and looking at the nutritional science. Then behind that, not as employees, but as consultants, we've got vets and nutritionists that are continually looking for us. A lot of our foods were originally developed by a Cambridge nutritionist who was a human nutritionist, then broke into pets. And it's a great advantage because, when you go into a vet's, there are books behind him on the bookshelf written by Dr. David Frape, who was one of our major nutritionists in the early days, and they developed the food. And with what we find with customers is, people are beginning to look at what's in their food, but for a lot longer than we've looked in our own food. Pet lovers have looked at what's in theirs. And the key, I believe very much the key to our success is we have always operated what we call an honest label policy. So, if you buy a bag of chicken and rice from us, then that is chicken and rice, and we will tell you exactly what's in the food, and we will never vary it. One of the things that happens in the pet food industry is many companies will use what they call price-based formulation. So they will have a recipe for a food that varies from week to week because of the prices of the raw ingredients. So they will sell something called chicken and rice, and it will have significant amounts of chicken, but it will have other meat in there as well. And they will label that as meat and animal derivatives with a minimum amount of chicken, which they'll declare, but then the other meat could be any meat that they want to put in that week. So it will vary. And with dogs and cats in particular, it's very important to keep the diet stable, so that they know, so you know what you're feeding them. And our honest label means our franchisees' customers can be confident that every bag they buy is exactly the same as the bag before. We don't change the recipe, unless, of course, we reformulate the foods. And if we do, then everybody knows. And it means it's very easy. And if you have a dog with an intolerance to a particular product, it's very easy to find a product in our range that doesn't have that in and never will have that in. So you can be confident that you're not going to cause any problems for your pet as you move forward.
Yeah.
But as well as that, we're also much more, because the business is very much about building relationships. So our franchisees really aren't selling a bag of dog food. What they're selling is their expertise and their advice to help you look after your pet in a healthy way. And that's what makes the life of our franchisees so much fun, because they're building relationships with owners and their pets. And to me, there's nowhere else you can buy pet food where the person you're buying it from will know personally about your pet, and the pet will know them and can give you that sort of advice.
So are the franchisees that join your business then, are they coming from a veterinary background or something like this? Or, could someone like me who's, got pets and a passion for it maybe, could I join, with the right attitude and approach, of course?
Yeah, as long as you could get through the interview with me, Ed, we'd let you join.
Of course.
But like most franchises, we don't look for anybody with particular experience. We will give all the training that's necessary. So people joining us don't necessarily have pet experience in business. Certainly the vast majority of our franchisees, probably 99% of them, are pet lovers before they join us. We've got one or two that don't have pets themselves and never would, but the vast majority of our franchisees are pet owners and always have been, and they show that interest. But then we will train them in nutrition, and we take our people up to a CertCam, an Ofqual registered exam that we sit them through in terms of pet nutrition, and teach them enough to be qualified pet nutritionists. And then they have the backup of all our behaviorists and nutritionists and vets on hand for them to call. So they've got all the advice and the experience and the training from us to move forward and become experts in their own field, with the backup of other experts that they can talk to if need be.
Yeah.
So
It's pretty cool. And I was looking on the website, and it's kind of well, it looks like it's hand delivered. These packages. Is that right? Or are they opening a shop and people are coming to them?
no, our franchisees deliver direct to the door, so it's delivery direct. So our franchisees will go out, they'll find their own customers, they'll meet people, they'll give them the advice, and then one of the benefits of our system is we have a tagline of "You call, I fetch," and if you're a customer of ours and you will call your franchisee, or the franchisee will call you and tell you it's about time for another bag of food, and then it is the franchisee that turns up. Our franchise is a man in a van franchise, so very few of our franchisees have anybody that works for them. Some of them do have some drivers to help them on occasions, but most of them are doing all the work themselves. So they're out meeting their customers, they're talking to their customers, they're delivering it. So when you call Neil for your next bag of food, if Neil's your franchisee, it will be Neil come in his sign-written van. It will be Neil that will come up the door and welcome you and talk to your pets, and you get the same person every single time, same standard of training. And that's the beauty of our system. Not only do we control our product, but we control the knowledge and the training that our franchisees have. So we know that the people handling our products and passing them on to our end users, have all the training that they need to give the right advice and to give the best advice they can to our customers.
Yeah, that's good. And I guess it gives the customer an opportunity to ask questions face to face and say, could you take a look and see what you think? And whilst, perhaps can't give medical advice, could say to them, I'd take them to the vets, or, okay, we see this regularly. This is something that maybe it's a change in diet that needs to happen. I guess that can happen in that kind of instance as well.
That's right, and we're very careful of making sure that people that need a vet that are talking to our franchisees because they want to try and save the money of going to the vet. We're not vets, we're not medical. No. So first sign of anything like that, we will go. Our behaviorists will give advice on behavior for almost anything. Obviously, if somebody's calling with aggressive dogs, then they need to see somebody, not have a telephone appointment. But other than that, we can do an awful lot of work with people on the phone. And our franchisees go through that training, and most of them are trained and go through our CPD things with further training, so that they become more and more qualified as they progress. But one of the really powerful things, and something I talk about in the training, is because our franchisees meet their customers directly, and the customers are talking to the business owner, there is that big relationship there, and they're talking to somebody that really cares. So our franchisees quite often get asked questions they don't know the answer to, and it's really easy just to say to a pet owner, it's an interesting question, I've not come across that before, and to be honest, I don't know the answer, but I know someone that will, and I will get the answer for you and come back to you within a few days. And what I always say in training is that never impresses a customer, but what impresses a customer is when you get back to them in 3 or 4 days with the answer, because that's what most people are not used to. Most shops or anything you go into and they say, we'll get the answer, you're chasing them for the answer. Whereas our franchisees really do have the backup of experts and the network. Let's not forget that the network of our franchisees is a huge database of information for our franchisees to share, and they'll get the answer and come back to the customer. So we very rarely come across a problem that we can't resolve for a customer in terms of looking after their pets.
Yeah, it's a good point, actually. I was thinking, when you look at one of the big supermarket chains, the big thing that you do miss is that kind of conversation sometimes when you're unsure about a product that you're buying, and especially with cat food, you can only read what the marketing message on the back of the packaging says. Really, you can't really determine, is this one going to be right for this particular issue with my pet or not. So it makes sense, and I really like that model, actually, because if you're passionate about animals, you're going around seeing an animal all day long, different ones, and they're kind of your little community, I guess.
Exactly. And, you buy food from a supermarket, there are no pet experts in the local supermarket. And to be fair, even if you go into some of the bigger pet shops that are out there now, some of their staff are very well trained. But the trouble is, when you go and buy it, you're there on a Saturday and you're talking to the people who are at school during the week and working on a Saturday job, and they don't have the training that's necessary. And to be honest, particularly with pet foods and to a certain extent with human food, if you want to read the labels on food, you need somebody to guide you through on how to read that label anyway, because labels don't always say what you think they're going to say. Some marketing companies are very good at making things look like one thing, but actually there's something completely different.
Of course, I mean that's a whole nother world completely, isn't it? The kind of green labels on things, and I watched a documentary about the fishing industry and the regulatory boards, and they're shocking. Yeah. But I won't go too far down that road at the moment. But when you was talking about the true labels, the honest, was it honest labels, true brand? Sorry,
honest label policy that we have. Yeah, we'll tell you exactly what's in the food, and it will always be the same. So
that's it. It made me think about how important that is in today's world, actually. And you can see the big brands doing it all the time, like McDonald's, for example. They pretty much walk you through every step of their process to say this is what actually goes into our burgers, because everyone's very conscious, aren't they, as to what goes into that food. So I think it makes total sense to have that on your pet food as well. So so obviously 20 years with Oscar, and a career before that in franchising with fast food brands, but then also being a franchisee. What have been the kind of key things that you've learned from that experience that you think other people should be aware of before moving into the franchising world?
I think, firstly, I'd say, anybody that's looking at coming into franchising is looking to run their own business. And that I think the main bit of advice that everybody misses is, I always argue that franchising is the best business model there is. I think it's, if franchisees and franchisors work together, there is no stronger business model. So anybody looking to go into business, I would recommend them look at franchising. But the most important part of advice I could give anybody that wants to work for themselves and own their own business is go out and do it. To me, the worst thing in life is to come to the end of your life sitting there thinking, I wish I'd done that, or I wish I'd done that. And it's, having been a franchisee as well as a franchisor, I promise anybody, if you start your own business, you'll have never had so much fun. You'll have never worked so hard. And you really do have to work hard. And it's not always easy. Franchising will minimize the risk, but it's not necessarily easy, and it is hard work. But there is nothing that's as much fun or as rewarding as running your own business. And I'd recommend people to do that. And I think, find a system that they believe in. My personal belief is that you need to find systems with a really good founder story. As I said earlier, I think, if you find a business that's been built around the principles of the founder and has then gone into franchising and found franchising as a way of growing the business that they love, rather than a company that has looked for something they can franchise, is my belief. But then, that's not always necessary. So I'd look for a system that had a really good founder story. I'd look for one that you believe in and you can enjoy working in. But remember, once you start a franchise, it's not easy. It's difficult, and the roles of franchisors and franchisees sometimes get a little bit blurred. And the franchisor's responsibility is to build a system, but it's the franchisee's responsibility to follow that system and work the system and build the business themselves. It's not the franchisor's responsibility to build a franchisee's business. And I think, I always like the analogy. I'm reading one of his books at the moment, and the analogy, and I know Ed, you've spoken to Scott Greenberg, and
yes,
he talks about franchising. He says the franchisor is the person that builds the bike, but the franchisee has to get on it and ride it to make it work. And I think that's so apt to franchising, that all the franchisors out there have great systems, but unless the franchisee follows it, works with it, then it won't work. And the other thing I'd say about advice to any franchisee, particularly those that are starting out, is that you will disagree with your franchisor, and disagreement is healthy. That gives good debate, but make sure that debate and that disagreement is always done in a healthy way. And you have to remember as a franchisee that everything you do, whether it's in disagreement or agreement with your franchisor, everything you do should be about strengthening your business and the system. As soon as you do something that is beginning to weaken the system because you disagree with it, then you're only ultimately hurting your own business. Because one of the things about a franchise business, franchisees will build their business and they'll build a lot of value in it, but a lot of that value is the basis of the system. So if the system, if the franchisee doesn't believe in the system or works against the system at all, then they're only going to hurt the value in their own business. So if you have a problem with your franchisor, sit down and talk to them constructively, because that's what makes the system and the model so strong.
Yeah, that's true. I personally actually think that's good advice for anyone in their career, to be honest with you. So I agree. I think franchising is a great business model. I think it's an option for everybody. I don't necessarily think it's the solution for everybody. And actually, I'd encourage people to kind of really sit down and think, do I want to be a business owner? What is it about being a business owner that I actually want? And they should understand all that entails, because you're right, it's very hard work, whether you're with a franchise or not. But I think you can also find solutions by having that open conversation with people that you work for. And maybe there's just a different way to work with them that works better for you as well. Or, if they can't provide you that kind of happiness or whatever it is that brings you happiness, then start to look around at other jobs or other opportunities. But I think being open and honest with people that are supporting you or leading you is the best thing, because then at least you know where you stand, they know where they stand, and it's the only way to progress, I guess. Hiding things and trying to do things so that there's quick wins for yourself, I think that always fails a little bit. And franchising is not a get rich quick scheme. And if somebody's looking for that, they should look elsewhere, I think is a big part of where I'm going, I guess. But I
think they should change what they're looking for, because I'm not sure there are any get rich schemes quickly that are going to work. And I agree. And I think that the one thing that perhaps I should say to franchisees that people forget about is that becoming a franchisee can be very isolating. And you have to enjoy working for yourself, and you have to be able to get on and self-motivate yourself. I think, in our business at Oscars, I get a lot of people joining because they think it's a people business and they want to be with people all the time. And they spend a lot of the time, but all of their time is with customers, and they sometimes become very isolated, because people, when they come out of employment, they underestimate what they used to get out of meeting in the coffee rooms and meeting around the water coolers and moaning about the boss. And of course, when you're a franchisee and you're meeting customers all the time, you can't sit and moan about the world with customers. You've got to be upbeat with your customers all the time. In Oscar, we try and get around that by creating what we call Coffee Connect, where we get groups of franchisees that meet every quarter for coffee and can talk, and get our franchisees to talk together and network together as much as possible. So that's where they can do that sort of thing. But I think, you need to be aware that when you go into business for yourself, when you're at the top and everybody else is working for you, you can become very isolated, although you're working with people all of the time. And it comes as a shock to people.
So, no. Well, it doesn't to me. So working in the recruitment industry for, 14 years or whatever, obviously a lot of that is speaking to people all day long. That is the role, to make those connections. But there's a saying that used to go around the office, which was, this would be a great job if it wasn't for the candidates or the clients, and it's because, they're expecting something from you. It's not a friendship all the time. There's occasions where there are friendships that you develop, but you're delivering a service at the end of the day, and there's expectations with that. The good part about the role was the colleagues that I worked with, and enjoyed having a laugh with, and working hard towards the same goals. And I guess that's the same in this kind of franchising model. You've got other franchise partners who are, ultimately on the same mission, especially if they believe in the values of the founder that's created this business. So in Oscar Foods example, I guess that's to produce quality food that's accessible and honest about its approach. So I'm kind of guessing that's what it is, but that's what I get from speaking with you and taking a look at the website. So maybe you can tell me I'm wrong.
Yeah. No, you're spot on, and the franchisees do talk together, and part of our role as a franchisor is to create methods of them being able to talk and network together. And to me, from Oscar Pet Foods' point of view, the pandemic put all sorts of challenges in our way, although our franchisees could still trade, and I appreciate they were very lucky compared to a lot of other businesses out there. But the new ways of working with things like this on Zoom and being able to meet remotely with people, and people getting used to doing that, has opened up a whole new world of support and networking available to franchisees who do tend to work, quite away from their colleagues as well. So I think it's put some exciting things in the future for franchising.
Yeah, sure. And for Oscar Foods during the COVID period, I guess pets still need food, right? And I was hearing quite regularly people were looking for pets because they wanted something in their life during that COVID time. Some company maybe for older people, but also younger families seem to be looking for quite a few pets as well. So I guess your business did pretty well, but how did you kind of overcome that lack of face-to-face in terms of franchisees working with their customers?
It certainly put some challenges up, and our franchisees, as I say, we're allowed to trade all the way through. So we were still delivering to people at home. So we were still being able to talk to people out in their gardens and give them the advice they need in that way. We did a lot of work on the phones and a lot of work with Zoom and things like that with our customers. Our biggest challenges was to get the message out there that we can do contact-free delivery. So, customers don't have to meet us, didn't have to. Lots of training to make sure our franchisees had masks and hand washing facilities in their vans and sanitizer and going out and sourcing sanitizer so that they had them at some stage. So all of those sort of things were there. Our biggest challenge was trying to work around what we do. We do nutritional consultations. So normally we would go into someone's house and talk to them about the pet and then try them with the foods. So we had to do all sorts of development to try and do that talking on the phone, but then give them a kit of samples of the foods to actually do the sampling part of that test at home. Which created a lot of fun and a lot of work, and it made us look at the whole business and made us look at how we work, and in many ways has made us stronger. The biggest issue we had with the pandemic, to be honest, and you're right, there are 3 million new dog owners out there through the pandemic. The number of people owning pets has gone up significantly. But traditionally, our strongest methods of our franchisees finding customers are actually going out and cold canvassing, so knocking on people's doors and talking to people, or going out into dog walking areas and talking to people, or country shows. And for the last 2 years, country shows just haven't happened. So, our existing customer base has worked really well and has remained as loyal as ever. And our franchisees are trading well. But acquisition of new customers has become really difficult because our model is based on face-to-face meetings, as you rightly said. And we've had to rework that. We've launched a new website, and we've optimize that much more for online sales and lots of work with Google and Facebook. So we've changed the model slightly to try and benefit from what's been going on, while not losing touch with our old model, because as that comes back, that will be. And the great thing is that some of those shows are now happening, and people are getting out there, and the shows are really successful for us at the moment. But it's in some areas they're still not happening. So we're looking forward to next year when the summer shows start again.
It's an evolution, right? But at least for those franchisees, there's that kind of hive mind that's kind of coming together, but also they've got a franchisor at their back who's, well, you said you've got a research and development team. So I'm guessing that's this is part of it, you know, finding your way in that online world as well as the face-to-face. So really beneficial for people that are in a franchise network. Yeah. So I want to kind of move on a little bit now to just briefly touch on your work with the BFA. So you've been about 10 years now doing work with the BFA. It'd be good to understand kind of what you're doing and how you're supporting the industry, really.
Yeah, I've always believed that, you know, if we want to continue with the industry, we've got to give something back, and I think the BFA is the strongest way of working with that. I think if the industry works with it and we push it, then it can really work for us. And you know, when I was chair, I used to talk a lot about the membership, and the BFA is, you know, it's very much like a franchise. The BFA, you know, a franchise system is a sum of all the franchisees, and the BFA really is a sum of all its members. And one of the things that I often hear from members is the BFA really need to push franchising, and really need to get people out there to know what franchising is. And I look at it and think, well, you know, of all the members, if the members are out there talking about franchising, then they've got a far louder voice than the BFA, which has a small team of people that does really well to coordinate it and put the resources out there. But the members have to pick those out there. And you know, if as an industry we want people to understand franchising, I think there's several things. One of which is a little bit controversial. I always think controversially, some franchisors look for different things to call their franchisees. So franchisees like to be managing directors or partners or something like that. And I think, you know, there's a perfectly good word for what our franchisees are, and that's a franchisee. And if we use that word, then people will hear the word and begin to understand what it is. And the other thing I think is, you know, when we put press releases out there, we should always make sure we talk about franchising as well. So if as a business we're saying we're creating X number of jobs locally, rather than in the sector we're in, we should be saying in the franchise industry, and making people understand it. And as members, something really simple, you know, during the pandemic, one of the things that really got on my nerves was the number of posts on Facebook you saw with people saying, as the shops start to reopen, we need to support the local coffee shops and the local businesses, not the big multinationals. And I was forever going on there and saying, yeah, but the McDonald's restaurant down the road is owned by a franchisee who's a local businessman who's invested his money in the local area, employs local people, and works within the local community, and probably employs an awful lot more than what you're thinking of as a local business. So I think we really have to get that message out there, but I think that comes from the members talking about it a lot more. And I think, you know, to me, the BFA has to be there to stand out as the bastion of standards and make sure ethical franchising is shouted about. You know, we shouldn't hide away from the fact that we all know that there are some bad franchises out there, and some people that try and franchise operations because they see it as a money-making material and don't necessarily have the business to support that. And the BFA, with its high accreditation, and standards, I think I see that as a bastion and as a good flagship brand for a good franchisee to have. You know, and one of the things I would always say to a prospective franchisee is look for members of the BFA, because you know they have a set of standards and they've been accredited. Are there good franchisees out there that aren't members? Yes, of course there are. But I think if you're looking at one that isn't a member as a franchisee, you need to do a lot more due diligence, because the BFA flag does quite a lot of that due diligence for you.
Yeah, I guess it reduces that risk, which I know a lot of people are when they're looking to invest really in their future. whether that's in franchising or otherwise. You try and minimize the risk. So I guess the BFA stamp of approval is just one way of kind of, I guess, not having to do as much investigation yourself. You know, you still need to do some, but at least you've got a little bit of a safety blanket there. That's this institute has actually looked at it with strict sort of set of rules around what those franchisors need to have done to be able to get this accreditation. So yeah, I think that's really important, but also important to highlight that there are franchise brands. I think I may have spoken to a few who aren't BFA members, and I know they've got fantastic businesses as well, but you just may need to do a bit more digging to make sure yourself when looking at those brands, I guess.
Yeah, and as I say, there are good franchisors that aren't members. I just think if as a prospective franchisee, you've got to dig around and make sure that the one you're talking to is good. That more recently with the BFA, since I stepped down as chair a few years ago, I've been working as an international director for them. So I'm sitting as a vice chair on the European Franchise Federation and a member of the World Franchise Council. And actually, looking at the work the BFA does on its members' behalf in standardizing ethics of franchising throughout the world and working with other associations in other countries. And at one stage, at the height of the pandemic, on a weekly basis, I was meeting with 47 other countries online, talking about what was happening in the pandemic, what government were doing, what restrictions and what packages were in place, and using that experience to inform franchisors in this country what was going on elsewhere. It's a hugely important job, and just working with them. I mean, just recently, I've been working on the block exemption regulations that are being rewritten in the European Parliament at the moment. And I'm not going to say that's an exciting job to be going through those all the time, but it is hugely important. And I think in terms of regulations and in terms of laws being passed, it is where the BFA and other associations worldwide are successful, franchisees never, or franchisors never hear about that work. It's, and there's from being involved in it, I can assure you there's an awful lot going on. 2 years ago, we were doing a lot of work with the Dutch Association because the Dutch government was trying to bring in a law that would stop non-compete clauses in franchise agreements, which was basically saying that if you had a franchise, you couldn't stop your franchisee using the know-how to operate another business in competition with the franchise in another location. Which, why would you teach somebody to use your system? If you're in hamburger restaurants, why would you teach them and let them open up a hamburger restaurant with your name on the door if they can open one in the next street using the same know-how with a different name? It takes
it away from being a franchise and being a training company then, right? Because you can train them up and then let them go. Doesn't make sense, does it really? Especially as most franchises don't make profit, as far as I can see, on the franchise license fee. That is typically going towards that setup and training costs ultimately. So that doesn't really make sense to me.
It just doesn't make it. I mean, part of the accreditation system to become a full member of the BFA is you have to, as a franchisor, show that your business stands without selling new franchises, so that you would make money out of the network and continue as a network even if you weren't selling new franchises. Although you don't want a franchisor that's not selling new franchises, I think that's very important, that that's where they're making their money. Oscar Pet Foods, we only make money if our franchisees sell pet food. We have to help them sell pet food. And I think there's an important role for franchise associations throughout the whole world to get governments to understand the importance of know-how, because franchising is about know-how. You buy into a franchise, it's the know-how of the business and how important that is. And when you look at things as simple as non-compete clauses, that becomes really important part of the system. And if the regulations go the wrong way over the world in terms of know-how and not recognizing that know-how, then that could be very harmful for franchising. And we need to protect against that, because franchising is a huge model. I think in Europe and perhaps lesser so in the States, but I think there's less of an understanding in government about how important franchising can be. You go to some places out in the Far East where the governments really understand that franchising and getting international companies to come in and develop their franchise systems in their countries is a great way of creating employment and creating investment in their countries. And governments give an awful lot of support to franchisors out in some of the Far East countries because they recognise that. And I think we need to get people to understand it. I always remember as chair of when I was chair of the association at a BFA conference, we had an ex-chancellor come to talk, and I had the job of having tea with him before he went on stage, just before his keynote speech. And I remember he said to me, he was looking at the list of companies that are attending, and he said to me, he said, if I'd known all these brands were involved in franchising when I was in number 11, I would have asked the BFA to come and talk to me about franchising at that stage. And I don't know how well it went down with him, but I just looked at him and said, well, we've never kept it a secret. And it's, there's just a lack of understanding. And
it's a shame. I guess, like you said, if all of the franchisees were saying I'm a franchisee, that would expand it even further, right? Rather than just the franchisors. But I guess that comes down to the kind of stigma that's attached to the words, right? A lot of people feel it's not a good thing to say that because there's some negative connotations, and I guess that's just because the negative press has been louder than the positive press. So yeah, I'm passionate about changing that and trying to do that as much as I can at the moment. And
most MPs only ever hear about franchising when their constituents have a horror story. But one of the other things I really believe is that we can work as much as we like on getting MPs to understand what franchising is. But the trouble with MPs is that, just by the time you get into that relationship and get them to understand it, they get voted out and somebody else comes in. So to me, the key as an industry is for us to talk and work with universities and colleges and get business people. I think it's absolutely criminal that we have people coming out of university with business degrees that have never heard the word franchising. What we need is someone to write a textbook on franchising, because that's one of the problems the universities have, is that there's no textbook on it. So they find it very difficult to put it in. But if as franchisors, we went to colleges and universities and said, let me come in and talk to your students about franchising. If all of the students in university this year understood franchising, then in 3 years' time, all the MPs in the country would, because those people are going to be the MPs. That's where we've got to do what we've got to tackle. And unfortunately, from a franchisor's point of view, that's long term, and they want it now. Whereas if we talk with university students, it's going to be 5 or 6 years before it filters through. But unless we start doing that now, we'll always be battling against getting it through.
Yeah, very true, very true. So, Simon, I'm conscious of time a little bit now, so I want to ask you a couple more questions,
Sure.
that just to change the kind of pace a little bit. So, I'm always interested to find if there's any funny, weird, or strange stories that people have got in their careers. Just helps me to smile and bring fun to my day.
I knew you were going to ask me that, and I was wondering whether the weirdest thing that ever happened to me, and I wasn't sure whether I should mention it or not. And no matter how much you press me, I'm not going to tell you which brand it was with or who it was. I think the weirdest thing that ever happened to me was I was asked as when I was supporting franchisees to go and see a franchisee who had decided he wanted to sell his business and he wanted to sit down and discuss it. And when I got to his house to sit and talk about putting his franchise up for sale, he explained to me that he decided that it wasn't working with his wife, and he was going to leave the country. He was going to emigrate and leave his wife and emigrate, which is why he needed to sell the business. he said, but we can't really talk about selling the business until my wife joins us. She'll be here in about 10 minutes. She's just upstairs doing something. She'll be with us in 10 minutes. So then we'll talk about it. And I can't, to this day, I can't remember what made me think that I should ask the question, but something triggered in my mind. And I said to him, okay, well, that's fine. That's important. Your wife does know that you're leaving her. And honestly, he looked at me and he said, no, I thought it would be easier if I told her while you're here.
Was he being serious?
But yeah, he was deadly serious. He was going to leave his wife, sell his franchise and leave the country, but he hadn't yet told his wife. And he thought having his support team from the franchisor sitting in the room with him when he told her would make it easier for her. At which case I packed my books away, picked my case up, and I said, I tell you what, I'll come back and see you in a week's time when you've had that conversation with your wife.
Oh, wow.
I mean, you do get put in some difficult situations, but I guess that is the weirdest one I've ever been put in.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I guess the relationship between franchisor and franchisee is quite a personal one anyway, isn't it? But to be dragged that far,
not quite that personal. Yeah.
Oh, crazy. That's funny. Thank you for sharing that. And the next question I wanted to ask you is, do you have any proud or inspiring moments from your career you're happy to share with us?
Yeah, I mean, the proudest moment I had was being the last WFC meeting we had physically was in Abu Dhabi, and the World Franchise Council had decided to give lifetime achievement awards to people in franchising, and in Abu Dhabi they gave out the first 5, and I was shocked but so proud to be one of those that was given an award, and to walk up on stage and to get that with people that I have looked at as giants in the industry, in the world, and to stand next to them wondering why I'm there. I thought that was fantastic.
Amazing.
But in terms of inspiration, and I've been fortunate to meet. I've been around in franchising since it's been quite young, certainly in this country. So I've met some incredible people. I was never lucky enough to meet Ray Kroc, but Fred Turner, that people will know, who was the second president of McDonald's and worked with Ray Kroc. I met him in my restaurants, and he was fantastic. I've met founders of other companies in the States, and I love meeting founders and talking about how they got involved in the business, and that's great. But I think you talked about inspiring people. I think the most inspiring person I ever met in business was probably, a lot of people would never have heard of him, but a guy called Bob Ray, who was the franchisee in America that decided to come to the UK and bring McDonald's over. He did it as a partnership with the corporation in the States, but he came over here. He brought his family over. He came with 3 members of his team from his restaurant in America to start it. And I always remember sitting talking to him, and he was telling me how he never doubted the McDonald's system. But he said after the first day of opening, with all the people in England asking where the knives and forks were, he said it was 50-50 whether he packed up and went home. And look at where McDonald's are in the UK now. But he was a fantastic guy to meet.
It's
really
a pretty
inspiring.
brave decision really back then, because obviously we're a lot more connected in the world nowadays, aren't we? And we kind of know where there's differences between maybe Asia and Europe. We're quite aware of it, and probably prepared for a noodle restaurant to only have chopsticks, for example. I guess we're kind of a bit more used to that. Whereas back then, I guess didn't know the American culture that well, and to have an American brand come over and say you're now going to eat it with your hands when we were not used to that, it's probably quite.
Yeah, and stories for another day, or perhaps stories you should get somebody from McDonald's to come on and talk about. But when you talk about how he came over here and couldn't find anybody that would bake the buns, because the buns had to be baked to his recipe, and and the big bakers were, well, these are the buns we do. Which ones do you want? And setting up companies. Golden West, who is big distribution company now and make a lot of products from McDonald's. Bob had to set up with somebody from Hemel Hempstead to produce buns and produced a lot of the products. And I believe the company that he co-founded, a company called McKee Foods with Keystone, who was a big meat supplier in the States. And they met somebody in Milton Keynes and formed a company called McKee, which was a 50-50 partnership. No, I think it was a three-way partnership between Keystone, McDonald's, and this guy in Milton Keynes to start it. And it was a business that Bob never wanted to be involved in. He didn't want to be making burgers, but that's what he had to get involved in to get McDonald's up and operating. And then eventually diversed his interest in those companies to the people that work with him so that they could concentrate on the restaurants.
Wow.
I'm not part of McDonald's anymore, so I shouldn't talk, but it could be a story you could get on from them sometime.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's interesting. There's loads of stories out there about them, isn't there? I've seen a few cost reduction ones. Obviously, me working with expense reduction analysts, that kind of piqued my interest. Where they're to save some money, they just basically took an inch off the napkin size and extrapolate that across all the branches, and it's massive cost reduction project for them. But I'm going to ask you the final question now that I know that you are franchising royalty. Getting that lifetime achievement award in Dubai. So I know you've given
I didn't even know I was ready to retire when they gave me that.
Brilliant.
I've got a lot more to achieve. Yeah.
Excellent. That's what I like to hear. And I know you've given lots of advice already to people that maybe are thinking about buying a franchise license. But if you could pick just one, what do you think is the most important piece of advice that they should follow?
I think I'd have to go back to what I said earlier, that to make sure that if you ever disagree, once you've got there, if you disagree with your franchisee, work constructively in debate to debate the solution, and work with your franchisee all the time. Because the foundation of franchising to me is always when the franchisor and the franchisee work together, there is no stronger business model. And I think, when franchisees and franchisors work together, this industry can take on the world. It's a fantastic model when it works, and that's what we've got to protect. And that somebody that's looking for a franchisee, find something with a good founder story that you enjoy, and somebody you get on with in a sector that you enjoy. But don't worry about what experience you've got, because that's what franchising is about, to give you that training to help you get involved.
Well, Simon, thank you so much for that. Really good advice. Thank you very much for sharing so much of your time with me, and sharing your story and your journey throughout franchising. And hopefully people are listening in are also taking a look at Oscar Pet Foods as well now, because it sounds I'm going to be very honest. Actually sounds like a lot more fun than I thought it might be as an opportunity. So may even look into it myself. You never know.
It's a great system. Anybody that's interested in getting in touch with us on the website, I'm more than happy to talk to them.
Fantastic. Simon, thanks again, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Lovely. Thanks, Ed.
Take care. Bye-bye.